Well, welcome everyone to Resource Roundtable. Resource Roundtable is an ongoing event every third Thursday of the month, hosted by EDC Team Jefferson. And it's a place where we invite one or more guests to come and introduce themselves and their services to the people of Jefferson County. Today, I'd like to introduce Douglas Hammel, the Business Services Director at EDC Team Jefferson. He's here today to help us learn more about efficiency through systems redesign. Welcome, Douglas.
Hello, thank you. Shall I just start?
Please.
Okay. All right. First of all business people make this mistake, including myself when I was in small business, is that you get busy and on the very first try of doing something, you create a system. A customer walks in, needs an invoice, or somebody makes an order, and you have to begin to accomplish those tasks, and you will do it in the most inefficient way possible because it's the first time you're going through it and you're making it up as you go. So you can go back as a small business person and improve your business. And when we talk about the big categories of improving your business, we talk about it in the right order. That is pricing, efficiency, and volume. Pricing is easy. That's free money for thinking about it and getting it right with a project costing system or a cash flow projection. Efficiency is still free money, but it's harder to get because you have to actually create efficient systems and think about them. And then when you add volume to good pricing and efficient systems, then you have a very efficiently run business. So today we're going to talk about the efficiency piece in systems redesign. So I'm going to share my screen now and the right one. So this is a page out of a book I'm writing about counseling techniques. And to complete the process of redesigning a system, you must do about 8 different things. And this is talking about process systems. So let me back up one step. There are 2 types of systems: process systems, that is stepwise systems, and causality systems. That means intentions have caused something and distant in time there's a result. But in a process system, what you're trying to do is control a flow. And that could be people, paper, information, products, services, anything that moves. So the process is to form the redesign team, understand how the system works now, draw your process map, draw your value stream map, draw your spaghetti diagram and current space plan, redesign the process with a new space plan, document the system, avoid implementation problems, and maintain oversight. Now you might think, well, that's a lot to do. I live in a small business, but you'd be surprised how much inefficiency is embedded in systems in small businesses. And this is of ultimate importance to small business managers because they don't have the time or the people to delegate to. So if you create an efficient system, what you're doing is you're moving your day from that 18-hour nightmare, into an 8-hour day with efficient systems. And then when you also hire people, you're placing them in efficient systems. You're not overpaying for the time. So the first step of form the redesign team. This is the part where the cash register starts working in your brain as a small business manager, and you say, I can't have everybody who touches this system in a room for an hour. Well, you have to, because if you create a system, you have to have all the people who touch input this to the system, get outputs from it, or touch the system. If you leave anybody out, it's a perfect system for everybody except that person, and that's your next logjam to solve. So you might as well solve it all together with all the team members. Now, yes, it does add up, but I'm guessing that the amount of time you spend designing the system is far less than the inefficiency of the old system. So form the redesign team. That's everybody who touches it. Now we're going to move on to understand how the system works. So I'm going to show you a publisher. Can you guys see that?
Not yet.
You can't see the process diagram?
No, or see your book page.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if this page isn't shared.
Can you unshare this one and try again?
Well, yeah. So so you see that one, right? You see the page from the book?
Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can just decrease it. Do you see a different page now?
We see to complete the process of redesigning a system, you must, and a bunch of bullets.
Okay, let me see. All right, well, let's see if I can. I'm going to stop the sharing of the screen and I'm going to change my products, and then hopefully we'll share the screen again. Hold on. Share screen. So can you see that now?
It's trying to load. Yeah, now we can see it. Good job.
Okay. And is it big enough for you to read the squares?
I can read it. How about you, Kate and Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone.
Okay. So when you first try to understand how the system works, you just want to name the steps. And this doesn't say anything about efficiency. It's just saying, how do we process this? So there's steps 1 through 5. And the first one says stack parts from the cutting machines. This is an actual real example from a client I had where they were making kits of certain things. So they stacked parts from the cutting machines. Step 2 was move the parts in packaging to assembly area, sort the parts, assemble the kits, stack finished inventory, and then the finished inventory is in a place where they can ship. So that process looks, fairly straightforward. And you think, well, they look like they already have an efficient system. But the next part of that is to make that process map, a value stream map. Now, did the screen change?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you can see the same process at the top, but now we've added data to it. Now, you can collect all kinds of data about your process steps, but what you're really looking for is waste. And waste could be in defects, could be distances. TT stands for touch time. It could be units, work in process, repetitions, misuse of personnel, having high-level personnel do menial tasks and so forth. For this one, we've picked distance, touch time, units, work in process, and repetitions. And so when we look at the first step and we try to measure that step, and you do have to gather some measurements, you find that the distance from to stock parts from the cutting machine is 25 feet. The touch time is 10 minutes. The units are 500. That's going to be the whole process step is 500 units. The work in process is 100. That means anything that's unfinished, or that's begun the process but is not in finished goods, is still laying around somewhere. And then repetitions. There are 5 repetitions in this step of bringing parts from the cutting machine from the cutting machine to their location where they're stored. Then we move on to step 2 and move parts and packaging to assembly area. And you see there's quite a lot of distance here. There's 1,250 feet. There's 20 minutes worth of touching those goods, those parts. We still have 500 units. The work in process is still about 100, but repetitions, we have 10 repetitions of moving parts and packaging to the assembly area. And by the way, interrupt me if you have any questions. Sorting parts is another thing, because that wasn't, that's part of it. They bring the things out of the cutting room and they are parts that are stacked, but they're not really sorted. And so distance was really only 5 feet. Touch time was 20 minutes. Units again is still 500. Work in process is still 100. Repetitions though are 10. 10 times sorting parts. Well, that's a little suspicious. Could it be just one time sorting parts? Then he assembled the kits, and the distance was 0 because they're sitting at their assembly tables. The touch time was 1,000 minutes. So you can see it's about 2 minutes per unit. If you're going to create 500 units of those 1,000 minutes, the work in process is still 100, and repetitions are 500 times. Okay, so that's just putting the kits together. How many times is this step replicated? Then stacking the finished inventory. Here's another big distance. When you see distances like that, I get very suspicious. So just in distance, just stacking inventory, there's a distance of half a mile, 100 minutes, an hour and a half. The units are still 500. The work in process is 100, and there are 20 repetitions. So you should be able to be starting to be suspicious about this. But the next step, any questions about this, first of all? Okay, no?
No.
Okay. Well, what you do is you create a spaghetti diagram, and it looks like spaghetti. But here's a space plan that goes along with it. So you can see the parts are in one area, And then you can see in the white squares that an assembly area 1 on the top left, and there's a second assembly area 2. And then there's finished goods, and there are quite a few distances between that. The reason there are 2 assembly areas is that the workers were both introverts. They liked having their own separate private spaces. One of them liked to move, this was a 10,000 square foot warehouse. They moved their assembly area way up to the top left, so they were way far away from everybody else and they could play their music. The other assembly area was where the owners wanted it, but the owners didn't think there was anything wrong with it and said, okay, we'll be nice to our employees. We'll let them decide where they want to put these together. Also, the assembly areas were just desks. So with multiple parts, it got very messy trying to stack parts on the desk. You know, where was the packaging? How did it go into the packaging? Where was the finished package stored? But if you look at the squiggly diagram between that represents repetitions. So you can see from parts to assembly area 1, there were 5 repetitions at 75 feet. That's, you know, so 150 feet round trip 5 times. That's very suspicious. Also for the second assembly area, there were 5 repetitions at 40 feet each. Then those assembly areas took their finished products to finished inventory, and one had 5 repetitions at a 300 feet round trip, you know, and one had a 200-foot round trip at 5 repetitions. Now, that just drives me crazy to see people walking more than a mile every day, taking time away from actually value added work, and walking with parts is not value added. The other thing is that in their assembly areas, these finished packages were stacking up. That's why the work in process was so high, because there were 100 packages between the 2 stations sitting there waiting to be transported to the finished goods. So with a spaghetti diagram and a current space plan, you begin to see where some of the waste is. And the waste here is in time and distance, touch time and distance. So now let's look at the process map with the current space plan. Now, this is just a different way to look at it. We have the process steps back in the gray boxes, and you see step 1, stack parts from cutting machines. And it's, you know, it's put in a parts area, but the parts area isn't anywhere close to the assembly areas. That's why the repetitions. But now you see that step 2, moving the parts to packaging, goes 2 different places. So that in both assembly area 1 and assembly area 2, you have step 3 and 4 replicating over and over again. And then the arrows from the assembly area show again that there's, you know, there are big distances to take those finished packages into finished inventory. Let's talk about this. Here's a new process map with a new space plan. And you can see that the space plan is very compact, and there's only 3 steps. In the gray boxes, you can say move and sort parts, one activity, move and sort parts and package it into parts racks. So you can see that elongated white rectangle that says parts racks. What I had my client do was build assembly stations side by side, and the parts racks were cubbies that you could fill from the parts side into the racks, and the assemblers could just pick those parts right out of the racks. So the person who was moving the parts from the cutting machines moved them right into the parts racks in 1 step. Then they assembled the kits, and the introverts didn't like this too much until they got used to it. But the assembly areas were side by side. They picked the parts right out of the parts rack. They never had to move from their stations. And they loaded those parts onto dedicated finished goods carts. And those finished good carts went 20 feet to the finished inventory. Now, if you look at the data, we have better data. Distance is, if we go step by step, 0, 0, and 20 feet. Remember, we had numbers like 1,250 and, you know, giant steps like that. The time goes 10, 510, and I'll show you a comparison. The units is still 500, but the work in process is only 2. That means that 100 packages that had been sitting around, it's down to 2. And the repetitions are only the repetitions in the actual assembly. So let's go to the actual metrics. So if we're looking at the old system versus the new system, We have a total distance of 3,650 feet versus 20 feet. We have a touch time of 1150 versus 520. We still produced 500 units. The work in process went from 100 things sitting around or in process to 2. And the repetitions for moving parts went from 20 to 0, no repetitions, it was done once. And the moving of inventory went from 20 moves down to 0. Now, this actually represented a 400% increase in productivity. And for this client, the reason that they allowed me to step in and help them, they'd been my client for 2 years and I'd been trying to get them to do this, but they got a big order from Canon Computers to build these kits for their clients. And I think it was 2,800 or maybe it was 28,000, I can't remember. And they added up the time it would take them to make the kits and they could not meet the deadline. And I said, okay, now is the time for process redesign. And in one day, we went from that messy system to this system. And they completed they thought it would take them 3 weeks to complete the process. It took them 3 days. So they were able to, just through systems redesign, just from thinking about it, to meet a big order, their first big order from a big buyer. They are able to increase their productivity by 400% and use their space much, much better.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm really curious what feedback there was from the employees after making this redesign. Like how did it work for them?
Yeah. Well, there was another little wrinkle to this. And one was that one of the employees who was an assembler, they allowed her to take work home and package at home, which was doubly inefficient because then, the transportation was miles and she had her and her kids helping out. And it was terribly expensive. So there was complaints about my extra work has been taken away from me. But the placement of the workstations, they really didn't complain too much about that because they agreed on the music they wanted to play. And so the introverts got along. Now, we did offer that one of those, the person who was taking work home, we offered them a job to coordinate all of the production. And we gave them some training and some instruction, and they did nothing with it. So they did not become the production manager, they were an assembler. So we did give them opportunities to advance in the system, and it didn't work for the one that did lose the extra income. But on the other hand, people got raises because they became so efficient, they could take on 4 times the amount of work, and their sales, of course, went up and their profit margin went up. And this was
going to say, it seems like with an increased efficiency in the system, that just be taking people's salaries up in a commensurate way too. That seems like a kind of a no-brainer to me. But
yeah, to say we're going to spread the joy amongst the employees that we won't hurt you with this productivity, we will help you with it and give you opportunity and pay raises. So yeah, it was ameliorated a bit. Also, you have to remember that this happened right in 2009 as the recession was hitting. And this business, because of the work we did, survived the recession and went into an expansion in the recession, whereas half their industry went bankrupt. So they went into a sales climb. After losing 40% of their business in the recession, they went into a sales increase in the early 2009. The efficiency then took effect in late 2009, and they went from a 2% profit margin to a 20% profit margin. They went from 600,000 in sales to 1.2 million, and all of their employees were employed entirely during the recession. So all of that good work did float down to the employees, that nobody lost their jobs, everybody got a raise.
Great.
Okay. Now, one of the things about systems redesign, and this is a lean manufacturing diagram, is that you can't leave it alone. Once you create something, you have to be in this continuous improvement, and it starts with plan. So you plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act. So when we did the systems redesign the first time, we were planning it, then we did it, we studied whether it worked or not, and then we acted to change it. So it wasn't just one round. In the first round, we did get a 400% increase in productivity, But that was without any dedicated parts racks or dedicated assembly desks. The very next week, though, my client took got ambitious, and he created the parts racks, and he got even more productivity out of it. So, and we slipped into this in the counseling, where plan, do, study, act, and that was the first system, and we kept going around this plan, do, study, act wheel until we were certain that that system worked, because it was the most important system. Then we took on the office systems and then other systems, but everybody was included in this. So the employees got they got paid to sit and create systems, which I thought was an excellent thing, an excellent way to use them. So questions about that?
No.
And Douglas, I have a question. What if this was more of an information system than a tangible product?
I just did one of those this morning. I was at a business where we called it their intake sales system, where on a spreadsheet, we created a process diagram, and the first step was intaking information. Then there was the next step was analysis, then a project costing for the job, and then customer negotiation and approval. And we just began to name those steps. And it's completely an information process, or an analysis and intellectual process. So it works great for information.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the businesses that are looking to, in the next near future, develop a succession plan and all the things that need to be documented if there's going to be a business transition.
Well, that's why this is a piece of, the turnarounds and expansions process I go through with all my clients. This is just the part of the efficiency piece of it. So if you're going to plan a succession, you really do need to build resources and capabilities, maximize cash flow and productivity, and reevaluate the market so that that business is a good, profitable business before you either sell it or pass it on.
So much of that information lives in the owner's head and isn't kind of developed as a process that someone else could pick up and understand. I think
That's right.
The systems design could be really useful in that context.
Well, it's essential. I think it's essential for any business. It's just that small business owners get so busy in the implementation of sales that they forget about all the contributors to sales, the pricing and the efficiency, so forth. Now I'm going to stop this share for a second.
I do have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
On camera here. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Judith.
Do and act. Because I know that I often do things not in the same order as what the cycle is that was there.
Yeah.
I might do plan, and then my mind is going into act, but I'm just wondering, is it actually do? Can you just make a distinction a little bit more there?
Yeah, well, when you're, the doing part is creating the system. The study part is saying, well, did it work? Did it go awry? Did our employees complaining about it? So you keep having production, or you have systems redesign meetings to do that study part of it and have the conversation. Then you act, right? And act on those activities, right? Plan, do, study, act.
Yeah, so that's like the reevaluated next steps is what.
Yeah, it's called continuous improvement. That's the jargon of this systems redesign, is continuous improvement.
Thanks.
And the history of that is that Professor Deming from the United States went and taught the Japanese this after World War II. And they made so much terrific progress on it. They started to outcompete the Germans in making cameras, the Americans in making stereos. And then the Americans woke up and said, wait a minute, what are these Japanese doing? And they said, oh, an American taught us this. And then Americans started to employ it. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to look at documentation. So I'm going to go down to page 169 here.
My initial type that you can't force connection, then it'll just be so unreal.
So to make this system work and to be able to have oversight on it. See, do we have another person coming in? Cindy, do we need to admit? Okay, so to make this system so that you can have oversight on it, you need to create a mini manual, a mini systems manual. And so the page 1 should have the title, should have policies and procedures. Page 2 should be the process or value stream map, which you've already seen. Step 3 are step forms, step-by-step tasks and procedures. Page 4 should be control forms, or however many pages that needs, or references to technologies, step 5. So let's just take a look at some basic. Okay, can everybody see that? I can't hear you guys.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the beginning of a mini production systems manual. Policies: all warehouse employees must do these 3 things: be trained on the system, read the kit production systems manual, attend the daily production huddle before production begins. That's part of the oversight. Okay, systems oversight meetings will be held monthly. That means that the continuous improvement keeps going on and on, month by month, to make it better and better. No change can be made in the system without sign off by all employees. That means everybody in the process has a say in it. And you might think, well, I'm the owner, I should have the say. But you can't imagine how many ways it can go wrong, but your employees can. Okay, so procedures: follow the process diagram and step forms. See next page for process diagram. So that looks familiar, right? There's our kit production process diagram. And you can see this by page. If an employee quits and you have to train somebody new, you hand them this diagram. There's the first page. There's the second page. They get a sense of what's going on. They get some instruction. Then we get a little more complex, and I'm going to have to make this a little smaller. Now, this is for manufacturing, and in a really small business, your form might not be this big. It might be just a couple of lines. But here's step 1. It says move, sort parts and packaging into the racks. And the parent system is kit production process. The purpose is move parts, right? It begins with a task, load parts into parts cart. There was a dedicated parts cart made, also constructed, and return parts to cutting room, or parts cart to cutting room. And who's responsible for each of those tasks on the left? It's a warehouse person. And what are the control forms? An order form starts the process, and a defects form tells if there's anything wrong with it. Now down here, there may be other things you want to do. There might be customer relations steps. If there are defects, the report for the warehouse goes to the production manager. And is there measurement? Yeah, time with a stopwatch. Not every day, but every once in a while we need to time. So there, if you just start this over again, I'm going to go back up to the top. There's your production manual, or your kit production systems manual front page. There's your process diagram. Nobody can get lost in it. And remember this step right here, step 1. Well, this is step 1, and anybody should be able to follow that. What backs up step 1? Forms. So in this little booklet, this would be the next page, page 4, production order form as a sample for the person learning this. Defects form, a pre-production meetings form, like who's the team leader, who are the attendees? What do we need to talk about? Like updates, problems, current orders, staff needs, goals, or anything that's wrong with the system. Every day you can make an improvement. And visual aids like a whiteboard, in which the team leader, the team, and the location are on that board within sight of everybody's work area. And you can put on the metrics, the time, the workflow, updates, improvement actions, so that every day is an opportunity to improve this process and everybody's involved in it. Okay, so now I'm going to go, first of all, any questions about what I've covered so far?
This is really helpful kind of as an overview for me. I'm not working with a product or manufacturing. I'm working with producing events and working with groups of people. And so if there's any point where you would have another example set that you could work with that's more in that realm, that would be awesome. But if not, I mean, I'm kind of translating as we're going. So
yeah, you have an information and a people system, movement of people and information. It's the same technique.
I'm getting that. Yeah.
You're going to have a stepwise process. You're going to have forms to intake the client, get enough information on those forms, like step one, intake from information from the client. Step two, you might have a planning form about a checklist of what things you have to tick off, like rental space, number of employees, catering. So there's all kinds of things that happen over and over again that could be systematized and made easier.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
also checklists for the employees, like if you're going to create an event and you're moving things like chairs, tables, tents, and so forth, do the people in charge of that have a form that they can follow? Did they accomplish everything? This is even good for rock bands, you know, it's like, did you wind up all the patch cords for the electric guitars and place them in the chord,
Yeah.
the chord box? Okay, so let's see, I'm going to go down to page, let's see. Okay, we're going to talk about causality systems now. That was a process system. And process systems are stepwise processes to control, again, flows of people, paper, information, products, tents, chairs, glasses, all of that. But a causality system really is trying to look for an intention. Some result happened that you didn't want to have happen. It was distant in time, so you're not even certain what started it, but some intention did start this. So here's a very typical one in small business. In the white box, it says it begins with urgency. Urgency towards something. It could be urgency toward a goal. It could be urgency to put out a fire, to take care of a client, to do anything. But there is that goal. And employees' time is directed toward that goal. Then another goal comes up, and this might be from the environment, or it might be that your system's breaking down, and now you've moved from this goal to some other goal, like fix this system. We move on to a third goal, and what happens as you redirect employee time from one goal to another, the goals begin to suffer. So by the time you get to goal 4, goal 1 is incomplete and employees feel burdened because they're now working on 4 things, but nothing is dropping off of their task list. When you get to the next step over here, goal 2 is incomplete, employees are ineffective, and your turnaround or expansion stalls, and sometimes employees will burn out or quit, and then you're right back where you started. Now, there's a great example of this, a terrible accident where a dam broke in New York State back in the late 1800s, and it went something like this. Wealthy landowners wanted easy access to their large vacation homes, and they had to drive 20 miles to get there. But if they could make the dam, the earthen dam, into a roadway, they could get there in just 10 minutes. Right? So their intention was to make it easy for themselves. So in step 2, they bribed the inspection people. The inspection people signed off on cutting the top of the dam down and putting asphalt on top of it. That weakened the dam. And then the next causality was that the dam broke. And then there were all kinds of recriminations, and there was a huge investigation by the state of New York. And they were right back to still couldn't get to their vacation homes. And I think it was, I don't know, 600 people died in the deluge from that broken dam. But they were back to step 1 in that now they didn't have a dam and they still didn't have access. So you can see you can work your way back around the causality. Like you could ask in this step here, why did the dam break? Well, the dam broke because it had been cut down and weakened, right? Why was it cut down and weakened? It was because people wanted easy access. Well, how could they get easy access? Well, they bribed the inspection officials. Why did they bribe the inspection officials? Because they had political power and they could do it. And so it got all the way back down to the fact that there weren't enough laws and oversight and punishment for inspectors if they went outside of the law. And so the state of New York started with this step, and it never happened again, of course. Okay, now let me just see if there's anything else I want to tell you. Oh, here's an interesting example. Part of this is that at some point you will need to draw your organizational chart. Because now you've created jobs, but have you codified the jobs? You codified the system itself, but now jobs inhabit these systems. So have you created jobs that make sense in this system? And one of the first things you need to do is find out whether you're using your employees well or not. Now, this is an isolated case, but it's an interesting one. I'm just going to read this to you. In one case, this simple method saved a small software company $50,000 for 1 hour's worth of drawing. This company was facing expansion due to a high demand for their consulting and programming services. All of their programmers were at 100% capacity with code writing duties, and the management was ready to hire another programmer at $60,000 per year to take on the additional work. When we drew the organizational chart, listed each person's task, that's the value stream, right? And how much time they spent on each task, we found that the 4 programmers were spending 40% of their time on clerical work. The obvious solution was to hire a part-time clerical person at $10,000 per year and free up the programmers for code writing, which they love doing. So just by drawing on paper, we saved this company $50,000. And they became, they almost doubled their output of coding time. So when those senior coders were full up, then they hired another programmer, but they already had the profits and the profit margin to do that.
I'm having a moment. I'm like, I'm wanting them to pay that clerical person more money for the value of the work that they are bringing to the table. Obviously,
Well, the interesting thing was that it happened to be a female in this case. She did get full-time work at, I think it was $40,000 a year. That was about 15 years ago, which was a pretty good pay at that point. It's because they became so productive and successful that they needed a full-time clerical person. She moved then into office management and she hired an assistant. So, when you're efficient and people talk together, then you create a system and job descriptions and job postings that actually make sense for the people inside of it.
Good to know.
Yeah. All right. So now I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. So let's go. I'm going to share my screen one more time, and I'm going to go back to this, but I'm going to go back up to page 158. And we're going to look at this one more time. So can you see the page?
Yes.
Okay. So what we went through again was forming the redesign team. That was everybody who touched the system, understanding how the system worked. It was very inefficient. We drew their process map and their value stream map, which had information in it, and their spaghetti map that pointed out, serious issues. We redesigned the process with the new space plan. We documented the system, and we avoided implementation problems by continually reinforcing that it's a discussion before every production run, once a month to improve the system, and we maintained oversight on that too. So any questions about this?
Douglas, I'll have to say that from my small business ownership history and now, running a nonprofit, it just seems like so common that we're running as fast as we can. We don't have time to do the systems redesign processes.
Mhm.
How do you help people? I mean, you get to a certain point where you just can't grow because you're so inefficient and you have to address it.
Yeah.
But how do you coach people to prioritize that time and, see the value in maybe doing less for a few weeks so you can get this dialed in and then go forward in a better way?
Yeah, that's a real concern. Also, the cash register running in the client's mind is trouble. Getting them into crisis is great because when they're into crisis, they're ready to listen. But I also don't start with systems redesign. I start with pricing, the project costing systems, trying to improve their profit margin so they have the time and they have the money to actually invest and pay their employees for the time involved in this. So part of the success in systems redesign is picking the right place to start. And you don't always start with systems. Like a lead manufacturing person would say, always start with systems, always start with quality. Well, no, you have to start with pricing almost every single time. You have to start with information, the accounting system and so forth. So you have enough information to actually make decisions with. Then, and always in my counseling, I say, we're going to pick one thing to do, only one thing. So if we're working on pricing, we're working on a project costing system. Until that's done, vetted, it has an effect in the business. By the time we get to systems, I'm saying again, let's pick one system. Even if we only work on it 1 hour a week, let's take that system, let's define it. Let's go through all the steps and then we'll implement it. And then that one system will be in place and that will free up time. Then we can do the next system. But you can't just go whole hog into systems redesign without some preliminaries like the pricing, project costing, cash flow projections, accounting. Unless that is the linchpin. Let's say that the business had no headroom for pricing at all. And that efficiency really was the thing. Well, if it was like at the edge of bankruptcy on the precipice, I would say, close your business for 2 days. We're going to redesign the system, the main inefficient system, and then you can start up again in 2 days. And I did that with a construction firm. And the reason they were willing to listen was that their sales went from $500,000 to zero for 5 months.
Whoa.
And that was during the recession of 2008, and they didn't expect it. And they had also made $100,000 mistake on the last 2 jobs. So they were not only out of cash and out of sales, but they had to be efficient when they started back in. So we got all the employees together. We created a system. They never had another $100,000 mistake, and the system was very efficient when they got it done. So the answer to your question, the short answer, Cindy, to your question is you pick one thing. The most important thing to do, whether that's pricing or systems, and you take one thing to completion. And I sort of been doing that at the EDC. You know, I came into many systems that were created by other people and I didn't like them. And like I've told you many times, Cindy, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning and I said, I have to fix this system. I came in at 4:30 and I fixed the data system. And that has saved me hours and hours and hours of time. And it was easy to teach to our admin assistant of that time. And so I picked one thing to focus on to get that done, to clear stuff off my plate. So I implemented my own strategy here. And now we are together implementing, new strategies because we're past a lot of the old systems. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share now. So can we see each other? I can see you guys. And I see Virginie Borg is here. Hi, Virginie.
Hi, Douglas. I'm listening. I'm having to be present visually in a different fashion.
Okay. All right. So just to reiterate, there are 2 types of systems. There are process systems and there are causality systems. Process systems are stepwise systems that you can make efficient by creating a process map and a value stream map and redesigning. Causality systems, you have to sort of work your way back around the causality to find the original intention and then fix what's ever wrong, or how that fix whatever got that intention implemented. So that's our presentation on systems redesign.
Thanks everybody for coming. We host Resource Roundtable once a month, the 3rd Thursday, and we try to announce who's going to be at that monthly session on our website. And the Zoom link's always there. There's no need to register, just show up. So thanks for coming. We're happy to get a chance to be with you for an hour. See you next month.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.